Hello, and welcome to the DCIFF Film Chat Podcast. I'm Erin DeVos, and I'll be your host for this season. Join us for insightful interviews that explore the work of up-and-coming independent filmmakers from all over the world. If you're passionate about film and keen to learning about the creative process from the future cinema greats, this podcast is a must-listen for you. Our mission is to provide listeners with the engaging and informative conversations about successful and innovative films, including features, shorts, documentaries, animation, and web series from across the globe. The DCIFF Film Chat Podcast is a unique opportunity for independent filmmakers to have their voices heard in a way no other film festival can provide. You can listen to the DCIFF Film Chat Podcast on all podcast platforms or visit our website at DCIFF-indie.org/DCIFF-podcast. Thank you. Hello, Film Chat fans. It's your host, Erin DeVos, here for another episode. In this one, I'm speaking with the filmmaker, Robin, who is the director and the creator of SPELLBOUND. He and I talk about the short horror film, and as well as talking about some challenges he had with the film and diving into the creative process and what that looks like in the horror theme, in a horror setting, in a horror film setting. Without further ado, let's dive in. Thank you so much, Robin, for joining the DCIFF Film Chat Podcast. Really excited to chat with you today and about your nominated film. We had selected your film was actually part of the Creepy Late Night Short program. And so, yeah, would love for you to just tell us a little bit about yourself and your film.
My name is Robin Rippmann. I grew up in Switzerland and I studied filmmaking in London. It's actually where I started working on Spellbound. It's taken quite a while to finish it. I think I started writing the script back in 2014. And it was just finished in 2022. It spent some time in production hell as well. But I'm glad I stuck with it and finished it. I like to refer to it as an occult romance. And it has inspirations from different places in it. And I quite enjoy surrealist art. I wanted to do something along those lines as well.
I managed to watch your film, which I thought was very, chilling when it came to cult. Well, I say the cult aspect, because as you beautifully described, and taking us through the different worlds, and it felt like you used like CGI. Or do you mind sharing like the creative process? Because I felt it just went through, without giving too much away, of course. I felt like it was really well done to be able to help us demonstrate, taking us through not only what the main character was experiencing, but also, the protagonist and what she was doing to kind of possess him in that way, or if that's accurate to say.
So back when I wrote it, I had this idea for a dream sequence, and pretty much everyone I spoke to at the time was advising me against having that type of thing in a short film. And I didn't really go into it with a clear idea of how that was going to be achieved, which is part of the reason why in the end it took quite a while to get the film done. I was lucky to be able to get some funding from like local Swiss institutions as well that helped me finish it. And I worked with a VFX artist, Switzerland-based VFX artist, and he would normally work on commercials and visualizations for architects and things like that. So this was a bit different for him as well, which is part of the reason why I think he was on board. But it was a lot of work. I think the disadvantage of not including the post-production team early on is that, there's some things that they look out for if you have them present, the shoot. that they know to look out for, that will make things easier on their end. So we didn't have that luxury. So there were a few things he had to kind of work around, but I'm really happy with the result. And it's funny, actually, I didn't see it at the time, but spending some time in production hell and taking this long to get finished was, in hindsight, the best thing that could have happened to the short film. Because the original version, the structure was quite different, and I don't think it would have worked as well. And having some time away from it allowed me to return to it with fresh eyes, and I restructured a bit. So there's some rituals we see where the main character is kind of led down a certain path into a certain direction, and those scenes weren't present in the original version of the film. And I think they helped structure it much better, and I think it flows much nicer as a result.
Absolutely. And yeah, to think or expand a little bit on that more too, would you say through the different like types of film, or would you, I'll back up a little bit more. So for the different types of films that you create, would you say, do you lean more into the thriller type of horror genres?
It really depends, I think. Well, because I don't really have huge body of work yet. I think I'm still working out myself what exactly my style is. I think it really depends on the story. I have some ideas for projects that would delve into a different kind of horror. So I think I'm open to most things horror, I would say.
I always what I like to ask about some filmmakers who dive into thriller and horror is where they get the ideas or inspiration from and lean into that. What ultimately inspired you to create Spellbound?
For me, it often starts with a single image, funnily enough. Idea in my mind about just a face appearing out of the dark in sort of the light of someone's phone. And it didn't really leave my mind. I kept circling back to it, and then I started building everything around that, basically. I've always found witches fascinating, so that seemed like the next logical step to tell a story that's a bit like a haunting, but maybe in a slightly different context that we're used to. And I think there's themes of toxic relationships in there as well, being drawn to something or someone that you know is not good for you. And stylistically, different surreal artists were an inspiration. And I think the main inspiration for the dream sequence was Jonathan Glazer's Under the Skin, because it has similar kind of void-like sequences. And I think that's initially what sparked the idea to try and achieve something similar.
It's funny that you had mentioned the, kind of the haunting of, like the ex or kind of like that toxic person in our lives, because that's kind of what I was thinking as I was watching the film, just kind of like, oh my gosh, like, that constant person that we think of, and, in such a haunting and chilling way that draws us much more to whether it be interesting or in a chilling way. So the way that you demonstrated it in the film, I thought was really well done, and it made me wonder, like, and ultimately inspired it. So I thought that was cool. And then ultimately, have you thought about expanding Spellbound into a feature or expanding into a series at all?
It's funny because I get that question a lot. And a lot of people seem to think there's a feature in it, or perhaps even a series. But I'm not really sure. To me, I think I've always seen it more as a one-off, because a lot of people ask me, "Oh, I really wanted to know what happens next," but I've always felt a bit like, yeah, I don't really care what happens next, because sort of the gist is in the shorts already, I feel like. I think I might have to dedicate some time to try and explore expanding it, because I haven't really given it a fair shake, maybe. So might be something I'll have to explore.
Oh yeah, definitely. And even if it's good as is, like, why not keep it as is? So
Yeah.
reminds me to think of expanding. There's a few things that you had touched on regarding kind of like the creative process and knowing kind of what was it? I'm trying to think of the exact quote you mentioned, but kind of like the hell of like the production that you went through in sense of like the duration that you went through. Which reminds me to ask, like, in the sense of what would you say, like, were some of the additional challenges that maybe that you experienced through creating the film, or thinking a little bit more broadly into the industry itself that you have come across or had thoughts on?
Yeah, I think in many ways I was my own biggest enemy. Yeah, like I said, when I started it, I didn't go in with a clear enough plan on how certain things were going to get done, which is something I definitely wouldn't do anymore. I had for the longest time this idea that there was no way anyone was going to help fund like an obscure horror short film, especially like a government level. So I was basically like, I'm not gonna even bother fund it for sure. But then over the years, I was like, well, I can't really say that until I've tried it. And I applied for funding and I got some funding. So yeah, the certain misconceptions I had, people disliking horror on principle. I'm sure there's some people that don't like horror, and that's fine. But I think the reality is much simpler. I think they either like your film enough to fund it, or they don't. It doesn't really have, I think, anything to do with preconceived notions. And the other big challenge, I think, was just sticking with it over such a long time. Sunk cost fallacy was always at the back of my mind. And yeah, but I felt like I can't die peacefully until I finish this short film. And but it was tough sometimes to find the motivation, especially because at the longest break in between starting filming and wrapping it, I'd moved back to Switzerland. So especially trying to get the ball rolling again from another country and getting back in touch with all the cast and crew members in the UK where it was shot, it took quite a bit of like pushing myself to push ahead and get it done.
Oh, for sure. I can imagine, because working in the dual countries, as you mentioned, and did you have to shoot also in Switzerland and in the UK?
No, it was fully shot in the UK. The ending originally was going to be a bit different as well. There's two characters that meet up at the end, and they were originally supposed to meet up at their workplace, but the location for that scene fell through a couple of times just before the day of shooting. So that was gutting as well. But I changed the location for the final scene. It was, funnily enough, the house I was a lodger in at the during my time in London. So sometimes you don't have to look that for locations. So it was all the backplates for the dream sequence as well were shot in England, and then most of post production was in Switzerland.
Oh, nice. Yeah, being able to just navigate the different areas of where you were shooting, and then also through the editing process, I imagine too. So, and you mentioned, yeah, you started in 2014 too.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I mean, a long time coming, but very well worth it in the end, I'm sure. And it reminds me to ask, you mentioned like a few nuggets here and there as you were describing some of the challenges, but what would you say is advice that you would give for either young filmmakers or anyone who's starting out?
I think it's mostly about persistence, just sticking with it. It might take a while until, there's a project that you feel that's worthwhile or that you're happy with. I have some short films that I've buried. I would also say don't get too hung up on what other people are doing and how they got where they are now. I think now more than ever, there's so many different avenues of like pursuing filmmaking. And it's been often said, make the kind of films that you want to see. I think that ensures that you find your own voice, you put your own voice into it, and also keeps you interested in the projects you're making, like as opposed to trend chasing or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's well said. Love this conversation and thank you so much for joining us. And was there anything that I didn't ask that you wanted to share?
No, I think we've pretty much covered it.
Okay, cool. Again, thank you so much for joining me, Robin. And how can we,
Thanks for having me.
yeah, of course. And how can we follow you along on your journey or where can we find you?
I'm just at Robin Rippmann on Instagram and on Facebook, and my Vimeo profile is just in my name.
Perfect. All right. Well, we'll certainly follow you along. So thank you again.
Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by the DCIFF supporters. We could not be here without all of you to be sharing this amazing outlet with filmmakers from around the world. If you are interested in supporting DCIFF, head on over to our website through the link description in the bio of this episode, or you can go right to the website, which is DCIFF-indie.org, to connect with us and learn more about our Future of Film programs, our festival, and also more educational opportunities in what we do with our high school students, community, and beyond. We look forward to your support.